Genesis. I don't know about you, but whenever, I don't want to sound like a commercial, but there's an outfit out there called Answers in Genesis, and they do a lot of good things, and they're the people who built that giant ark down near Cincinnati, the big ark you can actually go see. It's a life-size ark, and whenever there's something, every time, I'm not sure if this is on purpose or not, there's something going on and I don't know exactly where to go. I know I talk about Deuteronomy, but I often go to Genesis because Genesis brings you back to where you started from. When in doubt, start at the beginning, right? And then we can figure out where we got off. It doesn't take long to get off kilter. The third chapter throws things off. But by the time we get to Genesis 18, if we thought Genesis 3 was bad, we're going to read in Genesis 18 verses 20 to 33, then jump over to chapter 19 and read a couple verses there. But in Genesis 18, 20 to 33, we've got, it says, the Lord said, the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great, and their sin so grievous, that I will go down and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will know. The men turned away and went towards Sodom, but Abraham remained standing before the Lord. When Abraham approached him and said, will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked? What if there are 50 righteous people in the city? Will you really sweep it away and not spare the place for the sake of 50 righteous people in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to kill the righteous with the wicked, treating the righteous and the wicked alike. Far be it from you. Will not the judge of all the earth do right? The Lord said, if I find 50 righteous people in the city of Sodom, I will spare the whole place for their sake. Then Abraham spoke up again. Now that I have been so bold as to speak to the Lord, though I am nothing but dust and ashes, what if the number of the righteous is 5 less than 50? Will you destroy the whole city because of 5 people? If I find 45 there, he said, I will not destroy it. Once again he spoke to him. What if only 40 are found there? He said, for the sake of 40 I will not do it. Then he said, may the Lord not be angry, but let me speak. What if only 30 can be found there? He answered, I will not do it if I find 30 there. Abraham said, now that I have been so bold as to speak to the Lord, what if only 20 can be found there? He said, for the sake of 20 I will not destroy it. Then he said, may the Lord not be angry, but let me speak just once more. What if only 10 can be found there? He answered, for the sake of 10 I will not destroy it. When the Lord had finished speaking with Abraham, he left, and Abraham returned home. Heading over to verse 23 in chapter 19. By the time Lot reached Zoar, the sun had risen over the land. Then the Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. Thus he overthrew those cities and the entire plain, including all those living in the cities and also the vegetation in the land. But Lot's wife looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. At first glance, and this passage looks like a judgment kind of passage. It looks like a passage one would use to preach what they call, I'm sure you've all heard of the old-fashioned hellfire and brimstone sermons. And it certainly can be interpreted that way. Because if there's ever been hellfire and brimstone rain out from heaven, not sure if they have an umbrella for that or not, but that would have been it. And that's not a wrong way to say that, because when people decide to live outside of the will of God, there's consequences. There's earthly consequences, there's eternal consequences. But a closer look at this passage, I believe, reveals that what happened is in and around Sodom and Gomorrah can only be described as amazing grace. See, back in Genesis 13:13, it says, now the men of Sodom were wicked and were sinning greatly against the Lord. That's not a good thing. In Genesis 18:20, the Lord says, the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great, and their sins so grievous, that I go down and see if what they've done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me. You know, it's bad. And for the most part, I think we all know what was happening. But God, if you can imagine God saying, well, I'm going to go down there and check things out. Not that God actually has to come down here and check things out. He's everywhere, but he's kind of helping us understand what's kind of putting it in human terms. And it's and without going into too much details, because there's kids present, it's exactly what you've been taught that's going on in Sodom and Gomorrah. Modern scholars, and I use that term loosely, try to paint a different picture today. They want the world to embrace the sin of Sodom. And we just can't buy into it, because that's how evil works. That's just how evil works. It's not that bad. Well, how bad is not that bad? You know, again, how much cyanide has to be in the water before you say it's no good to drink? You know, a little bit or a lot. And it's, I'm not sure what was happening in Sodom and Gomorrah. I'm not sure how what was happening there compares to some of the stuff we see in our world today. The only thing I know for sure is it's not raining fire yet. And I hope it doesn't. But, and so, having said that, I think we're on the same trajectory if we're not careful. God is going to pay a visit. What's he going to find if he shows up? Because God was going to pay a visit to Sodom and Gomorrah, and Abraham knew what God was going to find. Abraham knew exactly what God was going to find. God was going to show up in Sodom and Gomorrah, and he was going to check it out. And Abraham knew that God would see how wicked the towns are, and so he begins to plead with God. He begins to negotiate. Now, I'm not sure if you've ever negotiated with God, in the sense that you knew something was going to happen, like, hey, God, can we try this instead? Now, I've not one of those who have prayed that way. I've never been threatened with total destruction before, to be honest with you, but Abraham's negotiating with God. Okay, I'm not the world's best negotiator. I'll be honest with you. I don't, if I go to buy something and they give me a price, I take it or leave it on the spot. I either take it, and that sounds good, or I just walk away. They don't like when you walk away, but I'm not real good at negotiating. I'm not real good at telling somebody, I don't think it's worth what you think it is. Let's just disagree, part ways, and let somebody else buy it. So I don't negotiate well, so I'm not sure how I would have done in Abraham's shoes, but I'm glad it was Abraham and not me. He's negotiating with God. He says, far be it from you to do such a thing, to kill the righteous with the wicked, treating the righteous and the wicked alike. And that makes sense. Why, if bad things are going to happen, why sweep away the good people too? That makes sense. We're not the judge of all the earth, do right. So Abraham makes a compelling argument. So much so that God actually kind of goes along with it. Sure, there's a lot of evil there, but there's some good people. So God says, okay, Abraham, if you find 50 righteous folks, I won't destroy the city. 50. 50 is not a lot of people. It really isn't. And that sounds reasonable. It really does. Experts estimate the population of those two cities to be over 200,000 people. So then 200,000 people. That's a lot of people. I think our county has somewhere in the neighborhood of 87,000 people. Is that right? That's more than twice as many people as our entire county has live in these two towns. You can't find 50 righteous people. You got yourself a rough town. So it shouldn't be that hard, or should it? Abraham knows how evil the people are, or have become, and he continues to negotiate with God, little by little. And you almost see the conversation. Abraham's like, okay, now that I've come this far, there's all 10 more. You know, and it's just like, and after a while, Abraham's probably a little bit concerned that God's going to say, knock it off, Abraham. You know, how many more do you want? So he talks them all the way down to 10. 10! That's not a lot of people. We can fit 10 people in a pew if we work hard enough. Maybe we shouldn't. We got to be far enough apart, I guess. But for the sake of 10 people, God won't destroy it. Now, does that sound like judgment or grace to you? It sounds like grace to me. I mean, what ended up happening was judgment, but for 10 people, they could have avoided the whole situation. 10 people! You think they got to pay 10 people to try to be righteous for a couple days? You know, that wouldn't have been very righteous. When we pick up the story in chapter 19, God sends 2 angels to Sodom in the evening, and Lot's sitting in the gateway of the city, and Lot welcomes these angels. They're planning to spend the night in the square, but Lot insists that they stay with him, because Lot knows what they're going to find in the square. He feeds them before they go to sleep. Verse 19:5 tells us that all the men from every part of the city of Sodom surround the house and demand to have the men brought out. This is again where modern scholars try to twist the story and want to convince us that they just wanted to get to know these guys and shoot the breeze. They just wanted to talk. And after all, it says they wanted to know them. And at first glance, that might sound harmless enough. What's the harm in knowing somebody? Hey, let's just get to know each other. What's wrong with that? Well, there's a much deeper meaning to that word that you have to know more about it to find out. And back in Genesis chapter 4, 2, we read the same word is used the way Adam knew Eve. and she conceived. Now, the Hebrew word for to know carries connotations that go way beyond an awareness that the other person exists. Eve didn't conceive because Adam said, hey, Eve, how's it going? That's not how it works. And you don't know that. There's powerful adult connotations behind the word. And the men of Sodom were not just wanting to have a meet and greet with Lot's guest. They wanted to know them the way Adam knew Eve, that made her conceive. But I rhymed. I don't have any more. That wasn't part of the plan. But they wanted to know them in that way. These guys wanted to do very sinful things with the visitors that showed up. And Lot is so concerned about these guests, he goes so far as to offer his daughters to the crowd. He puts his family at risk for the sake of these visitors who've come under his roof. But the mob wasn't having any of it. As usual, there really isn't any appeasing the mob. Have you ever seen a mob go, okay, thanks, we got what we want, we'll go home now? That's just not what mobs do. If you give them what they want, they'll want more. They'll always want more. Fortunately, the men inside were able to reach out, pull Lot back in, and shut the door, and they struck the men at the door with blindness so they couldn't find their way to the door. And I always find it amazing how God protects his people when they're trying to do his will. He just does. You know, we can't take that for granted either. And finally, these two men have seen enough. They say to Lot, listen, if you have any relatives at all, you take them, take your belongings, and you get out of here because we're going to destroy this place. It's going to get leveled. The outcry against the Lord is so great, they sent us to destroy it. And do we realize what that means then? Do we realize what that means? Let's go back. It means they couldn't find 10 righteous people. And I wonder if that counts Lot. Well, I don't even know if you count Lot's wife. At the end of the day, she, no pun intended, wasn't worth her salt. Again, not part of that. I didn't I just thought of that just now. That wasn't bad. But it was 10 people. 10 people, 10 good people could not be found in this place. Out of at least 200,000 people. So the only thing left to do is get out of town in a hurry. Lot tells his family the Lord's going to destroy this city. But you know what? They thought he was joking. They thought he was joking. And as dawn approached, the angels urged Lot to hurry up or risk being swept away. It's like, listen, Lot, you're a good guy, but if you're not getting out of here, guess what? You've made a bad choice. The city's going to get punished. The situation is so urgent that when Lot hesitated, the men grabbed him by the hand and his wife and daughters and led them out of the city. And they told Lot and his family, flee for your lives, don't look back, don't stop anywhere in the plain, flee to the mountains, you'll be swept away. That's a pretty stern warning. Because verse 23 says, the read this, by the time they reached Zoar, the sun had risen over the land, and the Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, we don't read about burning sulfur too often in Scripture, but whenever we do, whenever you read about burning sulfur in Scripture, it's a reference to hell. It's judgment. It's hell with a capital H. The place of eternal torment. Weeping, gnashing teeth, all that stuff that you just don't really ever want to do. God overthrew the cities and destroyed everything. But Lot's wife, looked back. She turned into a pillar of salt. And one can only wonder why she would do that. Why would anybody look back? What was there to see? What was one of the biggest temptations I believe we face today? And somebody should start keeping track of when I say that, what the different things I say, because we face a lot of temptations today. Some bother us more than others. But as she looked back, she probably, in my mind, this is where my mind is, she probably felt sorry for them. All those poor people, they're being destroyed. We hear things like God made them. He loves them. How could a loving God allow something like that to happen? And this is the amazing grace part. All it would take was 10 people, and that wouldn't happen. You know, how many of you have ever told your kids, you know, if you don't do this, you're going to get punished? And then the kid does or doesn't do it, just say they don't do it. It's not a real big deal. And the punishment isn't really all that heinous. Because maybe if you don't do this, you just don't get to, whatever, have a snack or something or go where you want to go. And that's not fair. How many kids how many parents have heard their kids say, that's not fair? It's like, is it fair? Do you want fair? You know? Fair is you buy with your own money, right? So, no, it's that's amazing grace, what happened there. But she looked back. God got no pleasure out of doing that to Sodom and Gomorrah. None. God wasn't there going, yes, I got to destroy them. We all know God well enough to know nobody wants to punish their kid, do they? Do you get any thrill out of telling your kid no, or telling them they can't do so, or no, Deb does. You see, yeah. By the look on your face, yeah, you do enjoy it a little bit more than you should. So, that's funny. I love the looks on your faces sometimes. But I don't think God got any pleasure out of doing it. I just don't think He did. But He's compassionate. He's forgiving. He's also just. And He executes judgment. And if He wouldn't have done that, He'd had to punt from being God. He'd be like, well, I'm not. And that's just not going to happen. When Abraham woke up the next morning, he looked down towards Sodom and Gomorrah. He saw dense smoke rising from the land like a furnace. Those two cities didn't get that sinful overnight, did they? They didn't just wake up one day and have problems. It started probably really small and probably built its way up to the point where there was no, it would take an awful, you know how hard it is to stop a train. It takes miles and miles to stop a train. Probably started years ago. And people looked the other way until not even 10 righteous people were in these two towns. And God's amazing grace isn't something to take for granted or to ignore. The sin of Sodom and Gomorrah had gotten to a place where the only possible solution was to destroy them. That's bad. And if we feel sorry for those who are living in sin, to the point where we question God's righteousness, if we question God's righteousness, how could a loving God let something like that happen? Well, how could a loving parent then tell their kid no? Because you want what's best for them. You don't want them to travel down that path. Part of what I see today in the world is too many of the people you're seeing on TV weren't smacked and told no when they were 2. And so now they're adults that somehow need to find a way to be smacked and told no. It's just a smack when you're an adult and told no looks different than a little smack when you're 2 and told no. When you're 2, you throw a temper tantrum and you get over it. When you're an adult, you've got to go to jail. That's a little different. And if you feel sorry for those living in sin, again, to the point we question God's righteousness, we made the same mistake Lot's wife made. We're looking back saying, how could God do that? God's grace is amazing, so amazing that, again, and I'm saying this a lot to make a point, if Abraham finds 10 righteous people, this doesn't happen. It's not like you had to get 50% or even 2/3. 10 out of 200,000. That percentage doesn't even register. It's 0.000. It's a minuscule number. So amazing. So amazing that in our lives, we can turn away from sin and never look back. There's nothing there to see, is there? There's nothing there to see. The amazing grace that saved you can save everybody. God's grace is there for all, but you have to believe. When I look around today at the state of our world and our nation, I wonder what God would do if He came here to scope the place out. What would He find? If He sent those 2 visitors to your house, would you protect them from the mob outside? Would God find 10 righteous people here? And I sure hope He would. A few years ago, I would have thought it would be easy to find 10 righteous people. No, I'd have said we could find 50 righteous people here. But now, I'm not as sure as I was. But what if God issued a warning to get out of town because destruction was coming? Would we heed that warning? Or would we be like Lot's sons-in-law? In verse 14, actually tells us that when Lot told them to get out, they thought he was joking. They thought he was joking. The same thing were to happen today. How many of us would think it was a joke? We say, well, God is love. He wouldn't do that. He could. He would. You know what? He did. But not before He exhibited the most amazing act of grace of all time. Score could have been 199,990 to 10. And the 10 righteous people would carry the day. And those 2 cities might still be around today. So my prayer for our nation on this weekend is simply that God would shed that grace on us. He shed His grace on Sodom and Gomorrah. And they opted to pass. They thought He was kidding. I know He wants to shed His grace on thee because He is a gracious God. That's what He does. But one thing I can tell you about grace, is grace demands a response. You have to respond. You just have to respond. We live in response to grace. whether you do it on purpose or not. And how we respond is up to us. We either live in light of God's grace, we sing about God's amazing grace, and we're grateful, or we reject His grace and continue to do whatever we want. Say, thanks God, but no thanks. I'd rather do it my way. And keep plugging away. I don't know if I've ever shared this story before or not. I don't think I've ever shared it in a sermon. But during my ordination interviews, when I was getting ordained, I was going through the interview process. I encountered a fellow who didn't agree with me on this. He didn't think that the grace of God could be rejected. Now, if God's grace cannot be rejected, then I got nothing to say to you today. Because you're all going to heaven, whether you want to or not. That can't be rejected. So we got nothing really there's no real point in anything if everybody's going to heaven and God's grace can't be rejected. But he asked me, he says, he ended up being the chairman of the board, which I didn't know at the time. And everybody, he was, anyhow. He says, do you think with an attitude like that, it makes you judgmental? And I think I caught him off guard with my response, because I didn't have a planned response to the questions coming. I actually said it before I really fully understood what I was trying to say. I said, yes, but no more judgmental than you are of me right now. I'm like, when I heard myself say that, I'm like, oh, is that what I said? Oh boy, that would trigger an argument. I said, but the word I would use isn't judgmental, I would use the word discerning. The world has trained us to discard discernment for fear of looking judgmental. Oh, we don't be judgmental. How many times have we said that? Oh, we don't be judgmental. Don't be judgmental. Yeah, we do. You know? We actually do want to be judgmental. Because we have to determine, that's something I want to do, that's something I don't want to do. That's called a judgment call. You do want to be judgmental. The world is coaching us the other way. Don't be judgmental. Don't be judgmental. I continued my answer because it just kept coming. That's the thing. That's not the first time I've been filled with the Spirit. That's one of the best times I've been filled with the Holy Spirit. Because I actually remember that's coming up on 17 years ago. I'm getting old. And I got a story for that too. I'll save for another day. But Jesus encountered a lot of people in his life on earth. He told a rich young ruler one time to sell all he had and give to the poor. He called another group of people a brood of vipers. He told another woman to go and sin no more. All three of those words are acts of grace from Jesus. He didn't call the woman at the well a brood of vipers, and he didn't tell her to sell all he had and give to the poor, because it wasn't an appropriate thing to say to the woman he met at the well. He didn't tell the brood of vipers to sell all they have and give to the poor. He acted graciously, differently toward different people. He didn't treat them all the same, because sameness is not what we're aiming for. You got to discern, judge, determine what people need. Three different ways of addressing people, in each case, grace from Jesus. And all three of those people groups had to respond somehow. Don't know how they responded. The rich young ruler, remember, he went away. But who was to say he didn't wake up the next morning and do exactly what Jesus told him to do? The brood of vipers, probably, and Pharisees, they didn't really change too much, did they? But some of them did. Nicodemus figured it out, didn't he? And some other ones kind of, Paul found his way on board. The woman at the well, who was told to go and sin no more, hard to say how she responded, but she no doubt responded somehow. God shows his grace to people in different ways. And as followers of Jesus Christ, it's our job to extend grace. It's my job to be like Jesus. And again, the word isn't judgmental, it's discerning. You extend grace to certain people. Somebody, somebody posts something online, and you read it, and you choose to respond or not. You choose how graciously you're going to respond. And sometimes the only way to graciously respond is to not respond, because what's it say? If you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. I'm not even on Facebook, because maybe that's the reason. Because it's that's the only way for me to be gracious to certain people, because let's face it, some people say things that are just head scratchers. It's discernment. And you have to exercise discernment. You have to exercise judgment. Because what if you have to tell somebody, go and sin no more? What if we have to tell somebody, hey, you need to sell all you have and give to the poor? That's what God's telling. What if we have to do that? And heaven help us if we ever have to tell somebody a brood of vipers. For as much as that might feel good when you think of a certain group of people, nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to stand in front of a room full of people and call them brood of vipers. I don't think Jesus got any real thrill out of doing that. But he would have been wrong had he not called him that, called him that. You know, not being judgmental, as that fellow suggested to me. That suggestion is a twisted way of trying to prevent grace from being shown to people. Well, you can't show grace to that person because you'd be judging them. Say, well, sorry, I'd like to offer you Jesus, but it would be wrong for me to judge you and determine that you need Jesus. See, it just doesn't fly. It just doesn't fly. They judge us every time they say that. And how people respond to grace isn't my call. Extending the grace of God to others is our call. And how we respond to grace, how we personally respond to God's grace, only we can decide that. Only we can decide that. So for our lives, for our church, for our neighborhood, for our country, for our state, for our nation, on the weekend we celebrate our independence. Our prayer is that God would indeed shed His grace on us, on thee. Let's pray. Father God, we thank you for your grace. Lord, you're so awesome. You're so amazing. We pray, Lord, not just you'd find 10 righteous people here, but Lord, we'd all be righteous. You've called us all to be with you, Lord, you've extended so much grace. Lord, you extended more grace to Sodom and Gomorrah than they had even deserved, and you've maybe done the same to us. Lord, we don't deserve the grace, but you've chosen to send your Son, Lord, to die for us, and Lord, we've got to respond to that grace. Lord, and we respond by worshiping you. It's in your name that we pray. Amen.